Whose side are you on, son?
Our side, sir.
Don't you love your country?
Yes, sir.
Then how about getting with the program? Why don't you jump in the team and come on in for the big win?
Yes, sir.
Son, all I've ever asked of my Marines is to obey my orders as they would the word of God.
Hey guys, I'm Kevin.
I'm Jake.
And this is Movie Matters. Today we talk about the 1987 film Full Metal Jacket from Stanley Kubrick, our second Kubrick film of the podcast. I've seen it before. Have you, Jake, did we watch it together a long time ago?
I'm pretty sure we watched it before. I've watched it maybe 4 or 5 times total.
It's a lot.
Yeah. I want to say, I'm pretty sure you and I watched it for the first time I ever saw it.
I think you're right, yeah.
And then maybe not 4 or 5 times, maybe two or 3 times. Like this would be like my 3rd or 4th time seeing it.
Yeah, this was like my 3rd. So this movie was introduced to me by my cousin back when I was like 14, 15 years old. So a while ago. And, you know, again, this guy, my cousin, introduced me to a lot of great 80s movies, To Live and Die in L.A. and Altered States and all those movies, and he introduced me to this movie, and we watched it together. It was a good watch. I mean, I like this movie. It's a tough watch, but it's Kubrick. I mean, he's a master filmmaker and makes masterpieces. It's number 109 on the top 250 movie list on IMDb of all time. So, like our last movie, Once Upon a Time in America, this movie's rated very highly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's obvious that, like Kubrick's mastery of film, like, is apparent in this movie. The things he does with the camera work, the acting, the script writing, which he helped write, are all just like phenomenally well done. As you alluded to, however, this is a brutal movie. So,
yeah,
it's like, it's kind of hard to categorize it in a lot of ways. I almost want to call it a black comedy, but it would be like the darkest comedy ever released, if that were the case. But like, yeah, it's kind of like a mishmash of all kinds of stuff, because like there's a lot of like borderline horror elements in this movie. There's obviously the like straight up like war sequences. There's a lot of like pretty heavily emotional like scenes. There's also a lot of really funny scenes, particularly in the beginning. So yeah, it's kind of all over the place, but just so well done.
Yeah. And it's like a 2-part movie if you think about it too, where you've got the basic training boot camp of the Marines, on Parris Island, and then you've got them going to war in Vietnam. And it's almost 2 completely different movies. It's very interesting. But it's like a part 1 and part 2. But it's, you said this, I agree, this movie's masterful. It's crazy to think that it's only was nominated for 1 Oscar. And it didn't even win. It was nominated for writing. Like you said, the writing's really good. The Last Emperor came out that year and won like everything in the Oscars. I looked it up, and this movie didn't make a ton of money at the box office when it first came out. It was okay. It did well. $30 million budget, made over $50 million worldwide, and then it's gone on, obviously, in pop culture and in film history. It's gained a lot of notoriety. There's a lot of awesome trivia on this movie that I can't wait to talk about. It's It's funny. I almost disagree with you with it being a black comedy. I mean, yeah, there's funny parts, but it's just like so brutal and like so dehumanizing.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the theme of the movie, in my opinion. It's just like dehumanizing these people going to war, that they have an enemy that they can't see, that they can't tell apart from, civilians. And I think the first scene really epitomizes that too. Like, you've got these guys just getting their heads shaved, all looking sad. And it's, you're just like thrown right into it. And I mean, this movie's shot with so many amazing long takes and steady cam. Like they showed in the trailer where the guy's like, come on, and they're going through the smoke when they're going through that village looking for the sniper at the end. Like, that shot in and of itself is like my favorite shot of the entire movie. It's so good.
Yeah, and like a lot of the like fighting sequences at the end are almost filmed like news crew footage, like on the ground, like in the conflict, which is really cool. And like you kind of get that feeling and as they like go through like the interviews of the different soldiers, and like that feeling kind of carries through the rest of the movie, which is really cool. And like a very drastic departure from the way that the first half of the movie is filmed, which is a lot of like more static or like very controlled kind of tracking shots. As you get into the conflict, it's a lot more moving steady cam and like dynamic kind of camera movements. So yeah, very, very interesting, and definitely adds to the effect of like the chaos of war. And
yeah.
But yeah, I'm excited to hear the trivia, because I mean there was a lot on The Shining.
Yeah.
I feel like Kubrick is just kind of like a notorious filmmaker, so
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure there's all kinds of stuff to dive into.
Yeah, so kind of going back to that, when the soldiers are getting their crew cut, the privates are getting their crew cut in the beginning, the opening scene, with that was filmed last. So the reason they look all pissed off is because they had grown their hair back after shooting, had wrapped, and then they got called back and got it all buzzed off again. I'd be pissed too.
Yeah.
Like, you could tell they're like all upset.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Again, I think the theme that really is apparent in this movie is just the dehumanizing of all these, soldiers, and, them going into a war that they don't know why they're fighting, in a sense. And they all have different, thoughts and feelings to it, like you said, with the interview parts. The whole like time they're shooting this whole Paris Island sequence, he like wanted them all to be in focus, which is pretty crazy. And he developed basically a special lens to do that, to keep them all in focus, and that way no recruit felt special. So pretty interesting. Again, kind of lends to the theme. I mean, Kubrick's all about there's so much substance in his movies. It's crazy. And like going back to like The Shining, and how there's like the documentary on all the different things that people thought he meant. It's like, there's so much meat to chew on with all his movies. And I love that. I really enjoy all of his movies, and one of my favorites, and I don't know if I mentioned it in the Shining review. Have you ever seen The Killing?
No.
Okay. That movie's awesome. You got to watch it. Put it on your list.
Yeah, I'll put it on.
Yeah, and also, like, there's no background on any of these soldiers. Like,
yeah.
And when usually movies do that, it's hard to care about these characters, but you do care about them. And I think the one you kind of care about the most is Gomer Pyle, is Vincent D'Onofrio's character.
Yeah.
Because he's just like, you feel so bad for him because he just gets ridiculed. And, like, you know, Matthew Modine's character tries to help him out, and then he bails on him, and he gets casted out, and then it's just like, what? It's like literally the effects of war. And it's like the guy's not even in war. He hasn't even been in battle, and look how that affected him. It's wild.
Yeah. And like another part of that is like I couldn't tell you any of the characters' real names. I just know all their nicknames that they're assigned by
Joker,
the drill sergeant.
Cowboy, Pile.
Joker, Cowboy,
Yeah.
Snowflake, and Pile.
Yeah.
Which is another like aspect of that like nihilistic kind of dehumanizing theme of the movie. So like they don't have names, they just have these like labels assigned to them, and you hear Joker calls Pyle Leonard as he kind of gets to know him, but he's the only person that refers to him as his like real name. And through the rest of the movie, everyone is just nicknames.
Yeah, it's shocking
Even
that
new characters that are introduced as their nicknames, not as a real person, which is interesting.
It's wild to believe that Vincent D'Onofrio didn't even get nominated for an Oscar for this movie. He was so damn good in this, and a lot of people say that it was because it's weird he didn't get nominated for an Oscar because he just transforms into his role. It's also weird that Arlie Aramy didn't get nominated for his role. And when I was thinking, and I just got it kind of mixed up, is An Officer and a Gentleman came out before this, and the recruitment officer in that, or the drill sergeant in that, was nominated for an Oscar. I don't know if he won, and I'm sure I'm getting it wrong, but that's apparently why they think he didn't get nominated, because Arlie Aramy is amazing in this too. Like, the acting's so good. Vincent D'Onofrio gained 70 pounds for his role as Private Pyle, but that's a lot of weight. And he broke Robert De Niro's record for Raging Bull in 1980, which De Niro gained 60 pounds for that role. And apparently that record stood until 2020. I don't know if anyone beat it. That's what I saw in the trivia. It took him 7 months to put on the weight and 9 months to drop it. He also, when he had the weight on, he scared women off, and people would often like repeat things to him because they thought he was mentally challenged. Like, pretty wild. And like this role, he credits this role with like changing his whole career, which I mean, I would imagine it did, because he heard auditions through Matthew Modine, who plays Joker, and he used a rented video camera and dressed in army fatigues, recorded his audition for Private Pyle, and at the time, D'Onofrio was working as a bouncer and only had acted in like a few projects, and so he didn't really expect to get the film. And Kubrick and his assistant called D'Onofrio, and D'Onofrio was like, "This is bullshit," and hung up. And they called him back, and they're like, "No, this is legit. Like, we want you for the role," which is super awesome. I just think that's funny, because I feel like I've heard stories like that before from people being like, "Oh, this is bullshit. Like, my friends are just playing a prank on me."
Yeah. I think it's... and like you said, it's surprising that this movie wasn't nominated for more awards. I feel like it's probably because this movie was very much, I think, ahead of its time in its realistic depiction of war, and like the context surrounding it. Like, I mean, this is close to Saving Private Ryan in terms of like realism.
Definitely.
Though I'd say this is probably even more realistic than Saving Private Ryan is. But I mean, that movie, Saving Private Ryan, came out 10 years later, almost. Sometime in like the late 90s, right? So yeah, almost 10, 11 years. So
I'm fact checking right now.
I feel like this is like the Back to the Future line. Like, looks like you guys aren't ready for that, but your kids are gonna love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, that's kind of what I feel like this movie. It's like people just weren't prepared for it in 1987. So,
and I read that like Spielberg was like influenced by, you know, the realism of Full Metal Jacket. So that's cool that you bring that up. And yes, it did come out in 98. I was right.
Okay. So yeah, 11 years later.
I'm usually pretty spot on with years. Usually. There was one time you schooled me. Yeah, the apparently the production was super long. So Kubrick's known for crazy long productions and taking forever. The production schedule was so drawn out that lead actor Matthew Modine got married, conceived a child with his wife. Child was born, turned one, all during the course of filming.
Jeez.
Like, crazy.
That's nuts.
Yeah. There's also a lot of great trivia on R. Lee Ermey. He apparently, there's a lot of like crazy shit with him, I read. First, Kubrick wanted to cast someone else, Bill McKinney, for Sergeant Hartman, who R. Lee Ermey plays. However, Kubrick was unsettled with McKinney, after the movie Deliverance, which, have you seen Deliverance, Jake?
No, I don't know if I ever want to watch it. I know what it's about.
Yeah, so I can understand why he's a little uneasy with his performance. He just basically was frightened by the idea of him playing it. Then he hired Tim Colseri to play Hartman. Colseri never got to play the role. He was actually a former Marine drill instructor. Or he never got to play the role, but he was the guy in the helicopter who's like shooting and like get some. That guy. He plays that guy. So R. Lee Ermey was basically a consultant on the film and was a former Marine Corps instructor. And he performed a demonstration video in which he yelled obscene insults and abuse for 15 minutes without stopping, while being thrown tennis balls and like oranges were being thrown at him, all while not flinching or blinking, basically, while doing all these insults, which is crazy. And basically they're like, oh yeah, okay, you're right for the role. And apparently to make his role more convincing, he was asked not to like fraternize with the cast or like, socialize with the cast. He also, R. Lee Ermey was involved in a Jeep accident on set, or just like, I think like near the set. He was driving and his Jeep flipped over and he broke all the ribs on one side of his body, which is insane.
Geez.
And like a badass, he like didn't pass out or anything and was just like he was like flashing the brights on the Jeep to get people's attention. It took 4.5 months for him to recover, and they paused filming because Kubrick liked him so much and wanted to like only have him as the instructor.
Yeah, I can't imagine anybody else being in that role. He's just like one of like his portrayal of the drill sergeant is like one of the most iconic kind of like war movie tropes ever. Like whenever you think of like what does Army basic training look like, this is the image that comes to mind of him just berating people like an inch from their face. Like,
oh yeah. Yeah, it's definitely
See,
ingrained in DNA
for
of film
sure. Yeah, it's
and pop culture.
it's hard to imagine anything else.
Yeah. So Kubrick was also originally going to write the dialogue for R. Lee Ermey's character, but he became so impressed with what R. Lee Ermey had improvised. A lot of that stuff is improvised, which is super impressive and also hilarious. Where I get where you're coming with the black comedy aspect of it. That Kubrick never lets like anyone ad lib. He's like, say the script. Like, you got to say the lines. That's how it is. Like, it's very rare that he does that. And yeah, like, he just was so impressed with it. And the only instance where Kubrick had to film Ermey more than 2 or 3 takes was that jelly donut scene where Gomer Pyle hides the jelly donut. That's it. Which is very impressive and also unheard of for Kubrick, who does so many takes. We kind of talked about it in our Shining review of Shelley Duvall, which she just passed away, R.I.P. to her, with her, like, and the crazy, insane toll and takes that he did on her. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Well, I mean, that whole boot camp scene is just like so. It's so crazy just watching. I think the main character of that scene is Gomer Pyle, like is Vincent D'Onofrio.
I think so.
And it shows the deterioration of him, of just like how he's so excited to be at boot camp. He's got that smile on his face, and the drill sergeant's just like, "Why the fuck are you smiling?" And he's just like, "I can't help it, sir," because he's like happy to be there, and it's also funny because he's hearing all these insults. And then you just slowly watch this man deteriorate into like a psychopath almost. Like, it's crazy. Yeah. Like, just like mentally disturbed, or just like he becomes unhinged, like something in his brain just switches on or off and like fucks him up. And it's just, again, it's that dehumanizing aspect that's just very apparent as a theme in the especially the first half.
Yeah, for sure. And like, I think the first, that the boot camp part of the film does a really good job of like expressing the like I don't want to keep saying nihilism over and over again, but it's like all these guys are supposed to be there. They're all supposed to be like brothers, and they're supposed to be trying to help each other. And like he just continually gets like isolated and like cast aside and like resented as he continuously screws up. And like, interestingly enough, like won't quit for whatever reason, which makes the guys like resent him even more. Because they're the ones, by the end of it, that are being punished for all of his mistakes. It's just kind of this like at that point where he kind of snaps, like you said, it almost becomes this like it's hard to describe, because like he suddenly becomes like the perfect soldier. And he's like no longer screwing up. He's like the best shot at the range. Ermey even says that like he would be glad to have him on his like rifleman brigade or whatever. Yeah. So like it's like this massive turnaround, but like for all the wrong reasons. And then, he like totally snaps the night after they get their assignments, and ends up killing the drill sergeant.
And then himself. Brutal.
Yeah.
Brutal.
Which, it's worth noting, I think, that they completely show him blowing his head off, which is not typical in a movie. Like, usually something like that is off camera or veiled in some kind of way, but like they did not hold back at all in that shot. I think it's pretty obvious why they're trying to really convey this sense of like dread and like almost like existential dread that like permeates this whole movie, and drive home, you know, just how like disturbing the entire the entire situation is with being cast into this conflict, you know.
Yeah. I mean, they beat him with bars of soap in their socks.
Yeah.
And just like him crying and like, oh, it's like heartbreaking to watch it.
Yeah. Yeah, like obviously we've both seen this a few times. My wife watched it with me and was like not prepared for any of this. So yeah, she was like at the end of the boot camp section, she just looked at me. She's like, "This is the worst movie ever."
Damn.
I was like, buckle up because it's not going to get better.
Yeah. I personally think the first half is arguably more entertaining than the second half.
It's interesting. I think the exact opposite.
Interesting. Like the first half goes by like that for me. It goes by so quick. The second half drags a little bit, but the whole sniper sequence is just like awesome. It's so cool and so well done. I don't know. It's very. Maybe it's because like, you know, like war movies, you expect a lot of people dying. You know, a lot more intense firefights. This one you get like one or like barely one and a half, I'd say. Like when
you get two. You get the base gets raided.
Yeah, but it's very quick.
It's pretty quick, and then you get the whole sniper sequence, which is fairly long.
Yes, but again, like you said, it's very realistic. So it's not trying to, you know, glorify the U.S. in this war, in my opinion.
Right. It's very much a like it's definitely not glorifying war in like any way, shape, or form. Even the times where the soldiers are being like macho and like acting like they're Arnold Schwarzenegger in Commando or something, it's a little unhinged and it's kind of off-putting and it's a little like eerie, I guess. Like there's always something that's just slightly off center.
Yeah.
And like it doesn't feel like you never get to that point where you're like, yeah, get them, you know?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
It's Which, never.
I think that's its point.
Right, exactly. Like it's trying to make you. Like the whole movie just tries to make you uncomfortable, as much as possible. And
no wonder your wife didn't like it.
Yeah. But like, yeah, it's even the ending. Like, I don't know if you have anything saved for the ending before I jump to it.
I do. I want to real quick, because you said Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was offered the part of Animal Mother in this.
Really?
The guy with the big machine. Yeah.
That would not have worked. I'm glad he did not take
I know. He turned it down for another movie that we've done recently, The Running Man. If you haven't listened to that episode, go check it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's a fun movie. But yeah, there was a lot of actors that were offered parts in this movie that turned them down. That would have been very interesting because I feel like, I don't know, a lot of these people were kind of unknown. They weren't, at least.
And I think that works for the movie.
Oh yeah,
like
agreed.
It totally makes it more believable. It puts you more in the movie. You're not taken out by Arnold Schwarzenegger or Stallone, you know, and like the star power around them. Like there's a lot of baggage that someone like that brings to the movie, and like expectations, you know, and like having no name guys be cast in all of the roles really helps solidify that dehumanizing kind of theme. And like
100%.
Who gives a shit about these guys, you know?
No
None
one's
of them are
special.
famous, you know. Yeah. They're all just like whatever, you know, guys. So yeah,
You're
for
spot
sure.
on with that. Spot on. Yeah, real quick, I want to talk about a couple things because the production design on this movie is awesome.
Yeah.
Anton Furst is the production designer. Anton went through like 6,000 photos of the Vietnam War for research purposes. He wanted to create an image of a nightmarish inferno. They didn't want blue skies. If the sun came out, Kubrick didn't shoot. He didn't shoot anything. When the squad goes into the burned city in Kauai, I don't know how to pronounce it. I apologize. They had every building on fire. Paris Island was supposed to train them for the tour of Vietnam, so we contrasted it with unbelievable cleanliness of the boot camp with the incredible filth of an actual war. And that point that they came up, like their training didn't train them for this at all. And that's what is a cool theme for this movie as well. It's like you can never prepare for war, and it's like it's such a contrast of like the differences of like training for war and actual war. It's just very interesting. And I like how they show that contrasting production design. And Kubrick was impressed with Anton Furst's production design skills because of his work in the horror movie The Company of Wolves, which I just added it to our list. We'll eventually get to it because I just kind of looked it up when reading that, and it looks wild, and I had never heard of it.
Me either.
Yeah, and so Kubrick had a lot of phobias, and he didn't like to fly. So they didn't film any of this in Vietnam. They filmed it all in the UK, which is crazy.
Oh,
because
that's interesting.
Yeah, especially with the sets that they designed. It's like pretty insane.
There's like palm trees and shit.
And yes, and so that's what's hilarious is there's some stuff where several hundred palm trees were brought in from Spain to give the location a tropical feel. And then they're like in some scenes there's like a lot of smoke like during the mass grave to hide like the background of the outskirts of London, which is hilarious.
That's funny.
Where was it? There was 200 palm trees were imported from Spain, and a few thousand tropical plastic plants were imported from Hong Kong. Plastic trees had previously been flown in from California, but upon seeing them, director Stanley Kubrick reportedly said, "I don't like it. Get rid of it." Which, that's hilarious, and also just a boss thing of just very Kubrick-like, and him just being the particular, very specific director that he is. There's also a funny thing where while they were scouting locations, Kubrick was driving his wife's apparently new SUV around the countryside with the cinematographer and Arlie Aramy, and at one point Kubrick noticed a location out of his window and became so distracted describing to the cinematographer how he wanted the location to be used that he crashed his car into a 6-foot deep ditch and rolled the SUV. And then, undeterred, Kubrick continued talking about the location uninterrupted as they climbed out of the vehicle and walked back home. It's like, what? Just another crazy Kubrick thing. Just It's like, all right, I don't give a fuck that I fucked up my wife's new SUV. I'm a famous director. Like, also, I don't care. Like, I just care about the movie.
Yeah. I gotta tell you how this is gonna look.
Yeah. Crazy.
But yeah, all of that definitely, like how anal he was, definitely shows in this movie. Like, I would have guessed that they shot this in like Florida or California or something
know.
like that. Like
Fucking London.
There's absolutely nothing that would like make you think that this wasn't shot at least somewhere tropical.
Yeah.
So that's super
and
surprising.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. This movie was also the last movie. This was one of his last movies. It was the second to last movie that he made. Because he makes Eyes Wide Shut in the late 90s. I think 99? I'm not too sure. Again, I'm usually pretty good. Let's see. Eyes Wide Shut. 99. Yeah. So, but he died prior to it being released.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever seen that movie?
Yeah, the movie's wild.
Very fucking weird.
Yeah.
Very interesting movie.
Very interesting. Very weird.
Yeah. What is it? Fidelio? Is that what there's like some term. There's like some code or something that they keep saying. I don't know. I'm botching it, I'm sure. But yeah, so this movie, this was his last one that was released that he saw, through its full fruition. Mm-hmm. So pretty interesting in that regard. I've got two more things of trivia, and then we can get to the end.
Okay.
Vincent D'Onofrio said during a long and tedious shoot at the old Beckton Gasworks outside London when they were shooting the boot camp scene, a few of the 300 or so hungry and thirsty British extras in the scene voiced complaints at the director, and he was basically taking way too long, and he was in like a crane. He lowers the crane, has his assistant go over to identify to the complaint who was like whining, and Kubrick finally is like, all right, this is annoying. He goes over to the extras and is like, all right, who is it? And no one says anything, like at all, because they're obviously intimidated by him. And then finally, one of the extras in the back stands up and yells at Kubrick, "I'm Spartacus." And then another one stood up and yelled, "No, I'm Spartacus." And then all of them started yelling, "I'm Spartacus." And so they wrapped for the day and ate.
That's funny.
Which is awesome. It's so awesome. Such a cool thing to have happen on the set.
Yeah, that's funny.
Another crazy thing is Kubrick's a big animal lover. And apparently a family of rabbits were killed by accident. And he was so sad that he stopped filming for the day and shut down production for the day. I mean, kudos to him. I'm a big animal lover too. But yeah, also surprising coming from a guy making this fucking movie, The Shining, all these crazy movies. So let's see what else so there was some arguing between Matthew Modine, who plays Joker, the main character, and Kubrick. Kubrick initially had him dying at the end. And so he was supposed to die in Vietnam, and they had shot a flashback to Joker's funeral that the movie opened with. So obviously it didn't have that. And Kubrick kept asking Modine, what do you think? What do you think of his death? And during one argument, Modine blurted out that Joker should live. And Kubrick was like, why? I want to hear your reasonings. And Joker saw his DI killed in basic training. The recruit he tried to help, Pyle, he saw him blow his brains out. And the only man he knew from basic training, Cowboy, dies in his arms during battle. And a teenage female sniper is killed by him. And Joker living with all of those horrors is worse than him dying. And so that convinced Kubrick enough to change the ending and have him live. Which, love that. I think that's awesome. And I agree. I think, that's crazy stuff. And Cowboy's death scene, and I think this would be a good segue into the end. Cowboy's death scene is horrific and sad, and like his acting is awesome, and his eyes are like so wide, and like, you know, I can hack it, and like he's still just a crazed man from basic training. That is just like, it almost makes him like childlike. It's sad. It's really sad.
Yeah. I do think it's interesting that every time somebody dies, nobody really shows much emotion. Especially when Cowboy dies, you would expect Joker to be pretty distraught and
shook up and
devastated. But then it's the one guy, the big guy with the
Animal Mother.
Yeah, Animal Mother's just like,
I'm in charge now. Yeah,
and he's like, let's go get some payback. And Joker just stands up and follows him. You know, it's like, it's just more of that dehumanization and kind of borders on that like surrealism of war. And like just the like how dark, you know, everything is. With that, I want to finish my thought about the ending because
sorry, I had a lot of trivia and I know it was long-winded.
No, it's fine. But the movie ends with Cowboy dies. They decide to go find the sniper. In sweeping the building, Joker encounters her. Finds out it's like this younger girl. Tries to shoot her in the back. His gun either jams or is empty.
Jams.
So she's shooting at him. He freaks out. And that's probably the first time we see him really like break down in like a high stress situation where like he actually like throws his rifle away and like scrambles to try and take his handgun out while the like column is like exploding behind him.
Great cinematography in that scene too.
Yeah. And then his cameraman / partner comes in and saves him, and shoots her like once or twice.
I think it's Rafterman.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Which you don't expect him of all people to do.
No, right. And like, as a side note, he's an interesting character because throughout the whole beginning of the Vietnam section of the movie, he's talking about how bad he wants to get in the shit, and like, meaning that he hasn't seen combat yet, and he wants to get in there and see, you know, what it's like. And we don't know if Joker has been in combat yet. I don't think
It's ambiguous. I think.
Yeah, but
Because they give him
like,
shit
no,
that they think he hasn't.
Yeah, he's like, you don't want to go. Like, just stay here, do the like, you know, bullshit stories on the base or whatever. But yeah, so anyway, Rafter Man.
It's almost implied, real quick. It's almost implied that he doesn't want to see war too, because he's like, oh, I'm going to go to journalism, and Arlie Army is like,
right.
What the fuck? You think you're some kind of hotshot writer? Like,
right?
It's like that's kind of your excuse to get out and not be in combat. It's like, it seems like he, you know, doesn't want to do that, even though he says I'm a killer, you know, and he's got his war face.
Well, his
like,
helmet
it's almost
has
an act.
"Born to Kill" written on it. Which
it's
the
like
other
very contrasting
side
too.
Sidebar about him is he's a very dichotomous character, and like the, you know, like what you're describing, he has, you know, he's like a really good soldier in boot camp. He like becomes the leader of his like squad or whatever. He's got "Born to Kill" on his helmet. Once he's deployed, he's, you know, acting like he's seen all this stuff. Then he wears the peace sign button, and that one
Very
like,
ironic.
sergeant or commander or whoever at the mass grave says like,
Yeah.
you know, why the fuck are you wearing that peace sign? Like, get that shit out of here. And he's like, or he asks him, you know, what the hell is that supposed to mean? And he's like, I don't know. He's like, I guess I'm just trying to make some kind of statement, sir. And he's like, well, what statement is that? And he's like, I don't know. So like, he's kind of, I think, conflicted at some level. And probably, like you said, like doesn't really want to be there. But he kind of puts on this front that he's like the tough, like badass.
Yeah.
Which is what we see at the end. Like he's given after Rafterman shoots the girl, we see him kind of break down and panic under real like combat stress. And then, you know, they're gonna just leave her there to die. And Animal Mother's like, you know, let's get the hell out of here. Like, leave her to
rot.
bleed out, basically.
Yeah.
And Joker's like, no, we can't do that. Like, that's not right. And so Animal Mother's basically tells him, like, all right, then kill her. Like, put an end to it. And Joker's kind of faced with this decision of, like, really becoming a killer or continuing in his, like, ambiguous kind of state.
Yeah.
And in the end, he decides he shoots her and kills her. And the movie ends with them marching through this like dystopian hellfires, like rubblescape, singing the Mickey Mouse Club theme song, which like is super ironic. I don't know if that's the right word, but like they're all like pumped about killing this sniper. Meanwhile, 3 of their guys are dead from that encounter.
Yeah.
And they're marching through this just total wasteland towards what the audience knows is an inevitable retreat from Vietnam, and what you would probably consider like one of the first losses in American warfare history.
Yeah.
And they're all singing this like Mickey Mouse Club song, you know, at the top of their lungs, like having the time of their life. So it's like this very weird and like it's like slightly disturbing kind of end to the movie. It doesn't really button anything up. I don't know that it has to, because we all know the historical context. But like I do like the ending. I think having Joker die would be not as good of an ending.
Yeah, agreed.
I feel like having him live and his like you know, voiceover in the end kind of talking about like these same kind of ideas of like, you know, trudging through this like wasteland almost, I think is what he kind of talks about, and like, you know, having to deal with the consequences of all the shit that he's been through. Is a pretty good way to wrap the movie up. Even though there is no real resolution to the movie.
Yeah, I mean, you would agree this movie's an anti-war film.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I mean a lot of people know the history of the Vietnam War, and you know, a lot of people disagreed that we should have been there in the first place. And like you said, it's first time we've kind of lost in American history for the most part. So it's very interesting, and I think this movie does a very good job of showing the brutalities of war and the dehumanizing of war and what it does to a person. But yeah, there's, like you said, there's no real resolution. You know, there's no flash forward to Matthew Modine's character like there is almost in Saving Private Ryan, where you've got Private Ryan at the end visiting the graves of his soldiers that saved his life. You don't have anything like that at the end of this. It's just like you've got these guys, like you said, singing the Mickey Mouse Club theme song, and it's just like they're so, what's the word I'm looking for? Naive.
It's almost it's naive, thinking that they're just gonna like keep crushing it like through, and like it's even naive to think that they think they're crushing it at that point, because like we know that's the movie takes place right at the start of the Tet Offensive in 1968, I think, which is the beginning of the end of the Vietnam War, where the U.S. just slowly got run out of the country, basically. I think they're at that point, I think they're not too far off from the evacuation of Saigon, which is like basically the U.S.'s last, final like quote unquote surrender in Vietnam. And they're maybe a month or two away, I think, when the movie ends. So yeah, I think naivety is like the best way to describe that. Yeah. Where they're just marching through and like, we're gonna, we're gonna keep winning, and it's like you're not,
And it's almost like brainwashing.
Yes.
Like the boot camp is them getting brainwashed, and then the ending, the second half is them brainwashed, just doing all this, and then at the end it's just like, cool, we're just, trained soldiers doing our job and thinking, like you said, we're crushing it. So it's very interesting. And again, it's a masterpiece. Like it's not a movie I watch often. I think it's pretty interesting that we've seen it 3 times. Because that's quite a lot.
It's a little surprising.
Quite a lot for our age. But it's Kubrick. I mean, Kubrick makes great shit. And again, I highly recommend you watch The Killing when you can, because it's awesome. I mean, I enjoy the movie, but I don't at the same time. You know what I mean?
Well, it's a hard watch, and it's engaging. Yeah. It's stressful. But like, I feel like the reward at the end is worth it. I mean that in the sense of like, you're watching like one of the best movies ever made, so like it's not like, you don't walk away feeling good. But you walk away emotionally impacted, and that's what a movie should do. This one's just negative.
We should definitely watch Platoon sooner rather than later and compare and contrast Platoon to this. Yeah. And maybe even another war movie. I want to see, there's one movie I really like. It's a very underrated movie. And I think it's Brian De Palma, actually. It's called Casualties of War, with an 80s actor, Michael J. Fox. And I believe Sean Penn is in it. Yeah. Is it? It's an 89. It's an 80s movie. It is so damn good and so underrated. Because it's you kind of get the brief in this movie, the brief treatment of the locals.
Yeah.
There's certain aspects, sprayed throughout the movie of just like the prostitution, that one guy kind of like prostituting out his sister, like, I hate to use the word whoring out his sister. You get the crazy guy in the helicopter gets some shooting just innocent, like, workers, like innocent civilians. Casualties of
their VC if they run, and their VC if they don't run.
Yeah. Casualties of War, we need to add that to the list because it's a very underrated movie.
I wish
I'm glad it's in the
Apocalypse
80s.
Now was in the 80s.
79.
Yeah, it barely didn't make the cut.
I know. There's a
The
lot of Vietnam
Redux
War
is
movies.
probably 80.
Yeah.
Or one of the other 12 directors' cuts of that movie.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting to compare this against other movies of the time and of the subject matter.
Well, and this is there was a lot of Vietnam related movies in the 80s. This movie, Rambo, or First Blood.
Yeah.
Like you just said, Casualties of War, I think. Platoon, I believe, is also Vietnam.
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember. I don't know if this is Born on the 4th of July an 80s movie with Tom
Another Oliver
Cruise.
Stone movie. I don't know.
Because I think that's about Vietnam,
Isn't
too.
that like 82 or something? Or it's 89. It's 89.
Yeah, so
82. I don't know where I got that from. I haven't seen that movie in forever.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I think, reflection on Vietnam in the 80s.
There is. Not so much anymore. Or I think the most recent movie that comes to mind for me is Rescue Dawn, with Christian Bale and Steve Zahn, which is a very good movie. Werner Herzog directed it too. Very good.
I was going to say Tropic Thunder.
Fair enough.
But yeah, it's not really a subject that comes up in film anymore.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was just beat to death in the 80s and early 90s.
Well, yeah, and we kind of talked about it, how the 80s, the machoism and how that kind of Arnold Schwarzenegger, one-man wrecking crew, and Stallone just taking out guys, and Stallone being a former Vietnam, a Vietnam vet in the movies. It's interesting, and it's funny how, not to get off topic, but those Rambo movies become more and more like the first movie is not about just mowing down dudes. The second one is more so. The third one, it keeps getting increasingly more violent. And again, we got to do the second one. But yeah, let's. I don't know what we're doing next. I know we have a list, but we might adjust it.
August is summer blockbusters.
Oh, okay, yeah, great.
Next we have. I think we're both super excited for RoboCop.
Good. Okay, I was wondering when
it's
we were
going to be
a
blast.
Yeah,
I've only seen it once, and it was a very long time ago, so I'm excited to watch it again.
Oh my god, I can't wait for you to watch it. I bought it on 4K Steelbook edition. I am so stoked to watch it because I watched it. I watched it maybe 6 months ago, and it's just so awesome. It's so awesome. Yeah, so we'll catch you guys next week, and we'll be talking about RoboCop. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode on Full Metal Jacket. Hopefully it wasn't too depressing for you. Tried to make it fun with all that trivia. And yeah, let us know what you think of the movies, and we'll catch you next week.
Yep. See ya.